Hi, everybody. It looks like it's 7 o'clock. I better get at it. There's an interesting question from Jennifer and one also from Lee and Carol in Nashville that I'm going to attempt to answer these things if I can pronounce some of the words in here. Jennifer Butler asked this question. Can you talk about the Ujjayi breath? I don't know it by that name. And how and if it relates to the movement of energy. Does the Ujjayi breath, I'm not saying that right, I know that, naturally occur in some people, or is it another way for the body and the personality to manage the energy moving through it? I had to look up that word. I've heard of ocean before, but never Ujjayi breath. Yeah, that's, is it Buddhist or Hindu? Does anybody?
I think it's Hindu, and I think that it's a yogic breath.
It's a yogic breath. Yeah, it is. Now, so it's probably more Hindu, but I think many groups of people use it because it stimulates the etheric body very, very easily. I think that that's really interesting as well. So here goes. It's also known by the Victoria breath. Marlene looked that up for me.
Victorious.
Oh, victorious breath means you're going to win. Okay. There's a couple of things that should be noted in it. If you really want to do it, you need to know what it is. So one of the things that you can do, it's fairly easy to do, but what you need to do is do a little strange focusing. It really helps to do this thing. It makes it easier for you. I'm not sure whether you're seeing the flashing of darker vision and lighter vision on this, but I'm just mentioning it so that people will know that we see it too. So the description kind of is like this. You breathe in at the back of the throat, and then like a straw, you breathe in around the same depth as you would breathe out. So breathing in and breathing out. Now this is what happens. There's a trick to the little trick. If you do the little trick, you're going to find how to do it really quickly. You breathe, you look at your throat first and be aware right at the front. You're going to all try this, whoever's here, if you'd like. You wear the front and kind of squeeze, not with your hand, but with your mind, squeeze the throat as if you're doing this. I think I can see that with the hand, like that. But inside, you're squeezing from one side to the other. It's like just from one side to the other side. You try that first. And when you do that, there'll be a little pressure in the back of the neck. But move your mind to the inside of the back of the neck. Right? And then take a breath. In and a breath out. Hold your attention at that level. You do that 2 or 3 times. If you have any perception whatsoever, a little bit, doesn't have to be a lot, you'll begin to notice while you're doing that, and your focus is right back there at the inside of the back of the throat, that it's like there's a little hollow that you're breathing up because you have a pressure here and you're kind of letting it go, but it doesn't fully let go, and then there's a little round kind of like you're breathing up a pipe rather than a straw. And the description was a straw. That's really not really as real as it needs to be. So when you're breathing up, first of all, what happens is the breath comes in the nose. I'm going to show you, just, I'm sorry, but I'm doing this. I know I've done that a number of times, but you breathe in, and you will notice the breath goes in 2 directions. One, it goes up towards this area and up like this in a Y towards the edges of the hairline. Then it cuts around the hairline like this towards the back. And you ignored, you don't have to do anything like that. If you practice this, you'll begin to notice that's what it's doing. Also, it will turn on behind the neck at the medulla area intensity that will enable the back of the neck literally to begin to move upward over the top of the head. Now, it's really interesting because at the lowest part of the inside and outside of the back of the neck, there is a small, literally a small little center back there, about C7, C8, and it will stimulate and turn the root center on. You will notice the root center coming on if you have that perception I was talking about before. And as you're just breathing normally, and not too long one way or too long or too short, either way, just about even both ways. Watch that, try it. You're still focused behind on the inside of the neck, at the back. Stay there. And down. You don't have to be, it doesn't have to be long. Just comfortable and balanced. It will quickly turn on the ear. A little spot right here at the lobe, just roughly there. And you may notice, some of you may notice in behind the ear, heading for the temples. Some may notice in front of the ear, heading for the temples, and it will stimulate up here. Now, when that hairline is stimulated, if you notice, it will also stimulate up above the head, literally. You will notice in the sensing area related to the body. That part of the brain just in front of where the movements are for the body, when you move your body. Now, relax all of that stuff and ignore it and just breathe. Focus is still the back of the neck. You'll notice when you're focusing back and the inside at the back of the neck, it feels a bit like your breath is going up in one place. It's not, but it feels that way because you've pressed the front of your neck together. A little trick that might be helpful. And gone inside to see where that is inside you. It affects the etheric body, and it will bring energy all the way up the etheric body from the root center right up to the top of the head. Almost, well, extremely very quickly. Now, if you have a single reaction, you'll turn the front of your body on, and that's not what this is trying to do. This is trying to turn the back of the system on. That's where the focus is. If you put your attention in front of the body, same thing will happen. So you're trying to put your attention back in a very soft way on the inside of the neck, at the back, and breathing in through the nose, going right to the back of the neck, and nice and calmly out through the nose. The mouth should be actually closed. Still your focus when you're breathing. In or out, back of the neck. Soft and easy, soft and easy. For some of you, you'll know that there's a little bit of a glow there. That's typical glow that's often there for those of you who have a little bit of perception, and that is everyone. After you attain that little bit of perception, that will just help you to emphasize or energize the etheric body more. There's a dilemma with this. I have to bring the dilemmas up, right? This is a great idea. Remember that. Remember, though, what you are doing is increasing your perception. That's what you're trying to do. You're not trying to anticipate your perception. That is, you're increasing your perception, not your anticipation. So you're looking almost like a research project. Okay, what does this do? Now you have to soften down to be able to watch. Watching is attending, not tightening. Attending is different than tightening. You have to attend, not tighten. Getting it right is related to attending, not tightening. Tightening is related to the solar plexus. This is not what this is about. Okay? This first thing. The field sensing mode is extremely valuable because that's the one that's been kicking around for the longest period of time, even though it is unconscious primarily, and you're beginning to have it more conscious. Now, I made a couple of comments. If I can read it, I'm sorry, I apologize for that. There is a particular kind of a dilemma. A dilemma is almost with anything and everything that's related to our ability to perceive. It's kind of a something that should be in the back of our minds all the time. When you are perceiving something, not only doing something, but including doing something, when you're perceiving something, it's as if you attain a level of engagement with that perception, which you begin then to describe as a valued place, and then you add for you the personality, whatever your name is, I don't care what it is. The dilemma with this is your focus is on the attainment, not the purpose for the engagement, not the purpose for the perception that you have. The ultimate value of perceiving is not so that you can be emphasizing your personality's capacity. It's so that a higher state can use that vessel, that engagement, not the rules, the engagement with your perception, to flow through and enable you to watch that flow through, to know that there are higher states. First issue. So you, without any doubt, know there are higher states. Attainment is what we are trained to be a part of. If we attain a certain level of activity, capacity, whatever it may be, then we value ourselves with respect to others. This has absolutely nothing to do with attaining levels, engaging with levels on higher states. I hope that makes some sense. It has absolutely nothing to do with the attainment of levels, the recognition of levels of higher states. Higher states are purpose-oriented, related to enabling a person to go beyond these levels of relationship with life. Because every day We need this concept of attainment and capacity to allow ourselves to feel valued as an individual. But at a higher state, we're not as valued. I'm sorry. At a higher state, if you have the capacity, for example, to do many things, you may not even know you have that capacity. You may not even consider, based on rules, personalized rules and reflexes, that you are any good at very much, while good at tremendous amounts of things that relate to higher states. That keeps you going round and round in a whirlpool of emotion, of physical magnetic intensity, and it's laced with negativity. It doesn't help you. The negativity is not there on higher states. This is a dilemma in our world because we are trained to evaluate, to name, to engage with, to validate ourselves based on rules and regulations made up on this level. And often altered state levels attempt to enable us to recognize that we are able to move into additional states, various states, and even help us to name them, because the naming is important for us here. If we go into a state that's not named, according to us, then we are in a non-named state. You cannot be of value then. So you have to put you down in some way. Not helpful. Not real either. But fundamentally, we depend on valuing and devaluing ourselves as well as others in that relationship that we have with ourselves. We're always learning as we engage with various states that are not necessarily always related to these states, although they are in these states when they're there. Otherwise, you wouldn't perceive them. We need this sense of being important for having them. Higher states, people just have them, and it's not that important, especially when you have them. How many people out there have learned how to breathe? Sorry, you didn't learn. You were coughed into it. You hiccuped. You blew. You cried. Ugh, do I have to be here? What's this? You didn't know. Well, some of you didn't. Maybe some of you took the breath and said, oh yeah, we're back in here. Good God, I thought I was out of here. None of these things are negative, but they are provoking. The vulnerability that we have in the disallowing of these rules and regulations is phenomenally difficult. It's very, very unnerving. But there's a tremendous kindness that we can reach for with respect to ourselves and understand that it's okay not to know at a higher state. You move into a higher state and you will seek rules out of that brain of yours that you've somehow reflexively memorized to validate yourself. Not the same at a higher state. What happens is you are enabled to perceive. Your conscious awareness is enabled to perceive something that needs to be perceived by you, so you can let it go and then still hold the memory of it as an act of perception, so you can let it go as opposed to hang on to it. For those of you who have become clairvoyant and haven't allowed yourself to lose it, you know you're hooked on being clairvoyant. It's easy for all of us to get hooked on almost anything that we attain to. None of it is negative. As a matter of fact, ultimately, you perceive, and it's all mixed up. Clairvoyance this time, absolutely none. I'm talking about the eyes at a fairly restricted level of clairvoyance, seeing colors, for example. If you are able to perceive colors on an emotional level, then you will see emotional colors. In other words, every time the individual has a reflex, has a concern even about himself or herself, you will see a frequency. You will discuss that frequency based on what you have learned, not based on a reality. It's what you've learned. Could be true, may not be true. But you will judge and assess others by that. Learning how not to do that will shift your relationship with the clairvoyance that you have. Are you open to allowing yourself to go beyond what occurs in the next stage of your existence, relating to being able to handle frequency operating through you on the etheric level, close to your body? Personalization is really strong. Something happens that you have capacity, you won't want to lose it. If you don't have capacity, you won't remember that you might have had it before and you got hooked on it. And you make an obligation to yourself that it's not going to happen this time. With mine, to be honest, back in the early 70s, it was pretty strong. You could watch people manifesting. That's weird. And beings manifesting. And then the internal question. Do you want to be clairvoyant? Or do you want to be spiritual? Very hard question. Well, my answer was spiritual first. But just a minute. If it's need be that I be clairvoyant just for the help of another, I wouldn't mind doing that. That's a hook. Get used to something. Don't want to let it go. Absolutely real in our human engagement with life. Absolutely. And I'm talking about this for a reason. Because opening the etheric body gives you access to not only the etheric body, but the astral form. And you'll see it in frequency, in colors. Look out for that. Simply because you will be judgmental. Not that you're bad. No, it's not about that. It's about you will perceive and you will feel very confident in the idea that what you are perceiving has to do with an individual who is this way or that way or another way, based on what you've learned. The method that you have learned to describe and understand those frequencies that you perceive. It will hold you in that place. Backing away from that judgment will help you to move forward. That's really tough. So here's the question. No matter how able you become, are you willing to go beyond where you are now? That's an adorable question. It's a question of love for yourself or for a higher state. It is a really disturbing question. I am so sorry, but I cannot apologize for it. It is a really deep question because all of us, no matter where we are in our relationship with growth, may find that we are asking that kind of a question from time to time. Circle those times with a whole lot of understanding, at least for a minute or two, because they're important to us, every one of us, don't care who it is. Look out for others telling you you're going in the right direction. Oh, that's really good, you're really able. It's because they have never experienced that, at least can't remember having experienced that. Not negative at all. But the personalities focus on becoming more able is focused on things. That's the nature of survival in our world. Higher states do not focus on things. They focus on engagement with states. And this is a fundamentally difficult question to understand for us. So I'll leave that with you with great respect for any answers you come up with. I don't care what they would be. They would be important to you. Be okay with the questioning, please. Give the answers time to have other options. I don't mean any disrespect with this one. This is really valuable to all of us. If you consider the human being in a state-related movement towards inner growth, don't only think about the coarseness of how we function here. Think about the willingness that we have to allow ourselves to go beyond the understandings that we garner with true gold that may not be as valued as we currently believe. But it's our nature to want to engage through the form that listens, looks, experiences the best we can. And also, it's a dilemma to broaden that nature. It's hard to listen to an inner growing process. But listening itself will be of great help. Questioning within, that's fine. But not for the reason that's personalized, but more the reason that has a deep sense of willingness to go into a state which you have not experienced and are only beginning to experience. I wish you well with that. Lee's question coming up. He says, Ron, lately I've been wondering more and again about how various sounds, music in particular, affect our energy centers. For example, the different effects of, say, heavy metal versus something like Devi, beautiful chants of Hindu chants. I guess such an extreme and Buddhist chants, by the way, an extreme example seems rather obvious. The question is, do individuals simply need to experience different types of tonal patterns and learn how to discuss their effects for themselves? See, the focus is always on the self. It's the way it works. And those tonal patterns affect individual selves. Also, group selves. Oh, we like that. Okay, everybody agrees. No, that's a group self. Or you get a bunch of disagreeers, and that's a group self. everybody gives a little bit of latitude, and disagreement is okay. I've written some stuff down. I apologize for that. Normally I don't do that, but this time around it seems like I've done it. Now, looking at heavy metal, and I'm not taking heavy metal as something negative here. I'm taking it just as an engagement with music, because it's quite an engagement with what one could call music. But basically, it's an engagement with an intense relationship with a kind of drumming. Think about that. The beat is strong, and the engagement is, one could say, coarser, but that would be an assessment based on maybe perhaps how you hear the music. I'm not a fan, but I would say that you can perceive the heavy beat of that music very strongly, and it affects the etheric and the magnetic body. One could also say that it affects your emotional disposition at low level, related to the centers here, the root, gonad, and solar plexus. I've always said that those three centers, even though they're the backbone of an interaction that we all have individually within the species, that is a construction of the house that we happen to live in, this form. So that's the foundational engagement. In the Christian terms, it says you must have a firm foundation, meaning be able to find a balance in your emotions, in your physical system, and the energetic quality or magnetic quality must be reasonably balanced. And your mental facility must be okay with not judging and assessing only how things should be in relationship to a belief. Then again, it seems to be okay if you have a belief that relates to a particular religious background or scientific background, whatever it is, or disbelief. As long as you believe in the disbelief, that's a belief. That's what it is, sorry. That's how it works. And with some thought, you will realize that that is a tremendous belief for you. You validate yourself based on this. You're fundamentally devoted to it. You're a devotional, engaging person to disbelief. It can be anything. Anyway, the body, especially the root and gonad centers and the emotional intensity turns on the solar plexus. And those two levels, engagement and intensifies, flow up right into the head. You might have had a headache after a period of time. You might have not. If you really like this kind of music, you probably wouldn't. But nonetheless, you can, basically. And it's not from the Coca-Cola that you were drinking either. Or whatever. The dancing motion that you have pulls of the body, pulls the energy through. You're moving the whole body in any dance movement, especially if it's really rhythmical and heavy. You move that system and you pound it, and close to the physical body, energy will charge into you. And it's tremendously powerful. And your focus will be on yourself. Because you're happy with how you're engaging. And you personalize it with others that are happy as well. Happy doesn't mean it's bad to be happy. It means the intensity is really strong and you're not softening or finding a balance in it. I suppose you could dance like I'm now dancing. I'm finding a balance. There I go. Don't move that shoulder too hard. You can do any of that kind of thing. But it may be, if the music grabs you, you're going to be there. You're going to be in a place where you're suddenly letting yourself go. There's an old tradition to put people in a trance state. Slight trance state can occur. And you can engage with a different level, even in heavy metal. But your focus will be on a coarser level than if you're focusing on minor keys, for example, softer music. Trance state means movement into an alpha state that is different than the beta state that you are involved with. And in this case, you're in a beta state. And the beta slips a bit, and you're letting yourself go, and you're moving out of control. So you could be learning that it's okay to be a little bit out of control as long as you keep a little bit of balance. How states would be interesting. The Native American background knew this, but they had a really different key. They knew that they could be in alignment with nature. They had totems. They had an engagement with nature. They would reach out and go on a search and be away for 3 or 4 or 5 days, maybe a week, maybe a month. And if they survived, when they were on a vision quest of some kind, what would happen is that they would have moved their relationship with their own self-interest in survival only to sense out an engagement with nature. And there are many, many stories where people have been meditating on, and the valued picture is looking over a valley on top of a hill or a mountain, and a wolf comes up and sits, or another animal of some kind, because they're looking for their totem. Meaning, they're in a state, and the animal is not afraid of them. If they were in a more intensely engaging beta state, there would be fear involved with this. And prior to this, they would do a dance. But here's the difference. The dance that they would do was a rhythmic dance, and it related to reaching up into the Manitou world, the kingdom world, the higher world, so that they could engage with the kind of loveliness of a different level or a different state, and let their whole body glow in that state and attempt to hold that state for a number of days. And there are many stories about this. You all could probably tell better stories than some of the ones that I can tell, but your stories are more important. Because if they're your experiences, then you know the reality of that experience. If you have done it once, it can occur again. If you have never done it, it can occur. If you've done it 10 times, it can occur again. So all of those times, including the ones when it didn't happen, it can happen. And that is a state akin to the alpha state. One could say, if you're looking at it from your brain movements, brainwave movements. Let's see if I left anything out here. So they were looking for a oneness with that higher nature, higher state. And that means root gonad and solar plexus. We're not focused on the self, but focused on a relationship, a spirit relationship. And look, they use words of that kind. Very interesting. Both engagements with energy, both focused differently. other musics, kinds of music related to Buddhism, Hinduism, Christian monks, Benedictine monks, Franciscan monks, Muslim, Sufi music is also very much oriented towards minor keys. And the Hebrew and Taoist, the same idea, focused towards minor keys. Apparently those minor key chants it's really interesting how profoundly effective they are to the emotions and to soften the relationship with the persona, the personalities. Unfortunately, you can create a persona by becoming spiritually personified, meant in a slightly different way, and where you become spiritual and then you sort of act spiritual, sort of kind of a spiritual way, and which becomes a kind of personification again. And eventually, and that's a state through which you'll go, but eventually you be like a normal person. You're not feeling good one day, you're feeling top of the world another day, in another higher state another day. But all through those days, you're attempting to perceive that flow inside of you as a reality in spite of how the manifestation on the outside is engaging. You attempt to look for the internal flow so you can pull yourself out of it and train yourself to want to pull yourself out of it. Of course, you have to know you're in it. You're in a reflexive response. And that's sometimes hard because your focus is to survive. Higher states don't look at that as negative. They look at that as, okay. They can handle tremendous power or wattage, whatever you want to call it. But when they're engaging in a survival mode, it's really hard to slow down that intensity because the reflex is to survive. And the survival reflex is really very strong in us as an individual human being. You're not trying to break it and annihilate it, because if you do that, all you're doing is compartmentalizing, which means it's still there. You're trying to include it in the form and help yourself to soften it so that you can know it's there, but you don't have to engage with it as profusely as one might believe is necessary to not only maintain as a kind of a semi way to survive, but to remain involved very strongly, so that if you fear that if you don't, it will disappear. It will not disappear. It will be one of the human traits that exist in you, and you will know it by perceiving it consciously and learning how to slow it down a bit, just so you know that you can engage, and it's an option to engage without the need to have it there, because that is the wattage reflecting in a reflex. Even to use wattage to soften it down is difficult for us to maintain or even understand, because our reflexive engagement with our root, gonad, and solar plexus is to help us to survive. Nothing is wrong there. There's no wrong in this. No right in it. No good nor bad in it. It's just that we're trying to understand how to function in it. And at a time when you do the softer music, more energy can come in. Oh, just a minute now. At a time when you're doing the great intensity, more energy can come in. Because wherever you focus, more energy will move to it, your focus. That's how we're learning. We're learning to understand. It's as if the soul, or deeper part of us, is trying to teach us, and it knows how difficult it is for us to find a softer, interactive place and bring out whatever is there when it's needed, and not when it's not needed. When we already have a set of rules about it, it's very difficult to adjust those rules. So it's experience only that can help us. That's why we're here, experiencing. And no disrespect is given, received. Oh, you can have an idea about that must be disrespectful. No, it's not. But it is honest. Very hard to deal with, this music of life. I'd much rather be listening to a softer level of music so I can soften down. But the music of life, wow, it's not always soft. It comes in bells ringing, people trying to pass you on a highway, people not agreeing with you, people saying, I don't like your flowers, don't like the weeds around your flowers. I'm just mentioning some of the ones that really tickle my fancy. Too many weeds in a garden, can't see the flowers. But if you like weeds, you don't call them weeds. Milkweed should never have been a weed. It's food for butterflies. Is that negative? Absolutely not. It's also true. But if you got a bunch of milkweed in the middle of your roses, it's really hard to deal with. Try pulling your beans in the end of June and July when you've got a bunch of weeds around your yellow beans or green beans. It is really hard because the weeds grow higher than the beans. Absolutely ridiculous thing to be talking about, but nonetheless, let's get back to Lee's question. Gotta have a sense of humor, and as soon as you find one, keep it, whatever. So there's an emotional. When this kind of music plays, it helps you to shift states, and you can use it in prayer. I'm not going to chance are used in prayer all over the world, and it shifts your state. But you're in a house that's called the place to go when you're going to pray. Outside would be a good place to do it too. It would be really helpful because it changes your emotional and your mental states or focus on a higher state. In some cases, in a God named differently with different people, different groups, or higher belief states to have an impact on the personalized state. In other words, you pull back from the personalized state and draw them into a more spiritualized rendering than simply personalizing belief can offer within. Now, that's a statement, but when you're experiencing something that's really nice and gentle and relaxing, and you open a bit, and you can notice that flow inside, you're not about to say, now just a minute, let me see what this really means. As a matter of fact, we have personalization slots for that exact way of talking. And that may be called good or bad, right or wrong, a whole bunch of stuff. But it's just a diversion away from what you're experiencing. Because what you're experiencing may be making you a little bit more vulnerable than what you're used to. Music can do that. I used to love Beethoven to meditate when I first started. What is it, the Ninth Symphony? Fifth. I must have liked the Ninth better. There's no Ninth, so it's a Fifth.
Yeah, there is a ninth.
Is there a Ninth?
But it was the fifth.
It was the Fifth I used, but the Ninth is there. I liked his music. So, and that was a chant to me almost. And then I got over that and went into other places. and enjoyed that, you will do the same. You will find your particular version of music that would be really helpful to you. Going back to that statement by Lee, until you can soften it down and let yourself go so that almost any music is good in your relationship with being soft inside, because you are focusing on being soft inside, not only on the music. That's a kindness to yourself. So there's an attempt to empty oneself. I'm going to read this off. I apologize for that. Oneself by focusing on music and attempting to perceive a deeper flow of energy that lies within us universally and has always been a goal by almost for eons of time. It's the same goal. Now some people say, oh, well, I can do that with silence. Good luck with that one. You can. You can do it with the ticking of a clock, a dripping of water, especially in the last 6 to 12 weeks here in Ottawa. It causes a kind of semi-conscious awareness, and they become conscious states. You become conscious of an internal, broader engagement with, you could call it the life force if you wanted, with the universal flow or with the spiritual flow. Might be helpful to you. So one last thing I'd like to give you. There is a book, Lee, because it's your question. This is Your Brain on Music by Daniel J. Levitin. It's interesting. It helps you to consider possibilities. You know, if you have an idea about this stuff, you want to go find out if science has investigated this stuff, just so that you can always throw in a thing. And science has investigated this thing, you know, that kind of thing. And so that makes you look better, you know, because people think that you're only thinking. And you're not. You're experiencing. The experience is important. Even a little bit. The slightest little bit is really valuable. It opens the door to allowing a little bit more. Over a period of time, it just increases. And that enables you to know, as opposed to only read about it from somebody else's experience. It's an interesting, as I said, it's a scientific focus on music, and it is I found it very interesting. You may find it, if you haven't already read it, Lee, you might find it very interesting. I wish everybody well. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll try not to be too serious next time.